Okay, let me move on. So, how should Christians respond to all this diversity? What's the best way for a person who believes that God is, that Jesus Christ is our Savior and that He's the only way to salvation? How do we address all of this type of diversity? Well, one response, which a lot of Christians have chosen to do, is to condemn all of this. This is all evil, it's negative, it's terrible, and if we condemn it, we can just try to stop it. So let's stop all the gay people. Let's stop all the sex. Let's stop all these people who are trying to force their religion on us. Right? Let's make this a Christian country again. Right? That's one response. Another one is to basically say, well, I'm not going to deal with it. Disengage. These are real life issues. But you know, this is not, I think this is not a real response that you will want to have, because your children are the ones who are going to experience this more than you are, probably. So disengaging may not be, unless you decide to try your best to keep your kids protected, which is very impossible, actually. This is another possible response. A third response is to say, yeah, it's okay. What's the big deal? Let everything, you know, if a gay person comes, I'll just learn to accept them. They're fine. If people are telling me that I can't share the gospel, I can't be a Christian, okay, that's okay. Let's just leave it alone. Let's just accept it. Well, this response is more like the deer who's about to be run over by a car. You're just waiting and just watching it to get killed. The deer in headlights. I think this is also not a good response, because it also shows that we're not taking our Christian faith seriously. We do have to stand for something. And I think that but all three responses are, I think, problematic. To condemn it, to turn your back and disengage, or just to ignore it. I think, or to accept it, I think are not good responses. And I want to sort of suggest that maybe as Christians, we can find a different kind of response. And I'm almost done now. I just want to get ready to conclude and have us look at these questions. Martin Luther King Jr. said that the church is not the master or the servant of the state, but it's the conscience of the state. It must be the guide and the critic of the state, but never its tool. If the church does not recapture its prophetic zeal, it will become an irrelevant social club without moral or spiritual authority. And I believe that. So as a church, I would say that we're not here to condemn, we're not here to embrace critically, and we're not here to disengage, but we're here to always be ready to share our values. Okay? And how we share our values is the challenge. And as parents, it's our job to work together to help be a positive good for our community. So I want to conclude by just talking about maybe some three ways of thinking about how to engage this world that our kids will grow up in. One is to be a peacemaker. Don't condemn, don't demonize, and don't fight people. If gay people want to come and present their curriculum in your school, don't protest. I would say listen, learn, understand what their experience is, make peace. Okay? That's the first move. Yes, we don't agree with them, but we have to live with them. Okay? So peacemaking is a very important call. The second one is to be joyful. Instead of being angry and upset about all these negative things that are happening, be positive and trust that Jesus is going to take care of all of this, and that your kids will learn through your faith, and that they too will grow up and go through this. In fact, I would say that the reason why my children are still pretty strong with their faith is because we never told them this is wrong, therefore don't get near it. We always wanted them to engage it. All the issues that came up, like homosexuality, for example, and we always talked to them about how to be positive towards people, how to show your joy as a Christian. Right? And the worst kind of Christians are the ones who are very negative and very, the word is Pharisee, right? They're always condemning and judging other people. And that is worse than, so that's just my opinion. And the third one is love. Be ready to embrace and to care. Even those who are very different from us are also people that God loves. They're God's lost sheep in some cases. So our role is to love them. Okay? Now, this is not probably enough to satisfy you, but I would say that the PJ well, I got it mixed up. The PLJ solution is the best way to approach parenting issues. Right? Because, so if any Christians have been mobilized to try to fight this or fight that, I would say be careful. Don't go there. That's not how we witnessed for our faith. Okay? So that's pretty much what I wanted to share. And good, so 8:15, so there's plenty of time for us to go back to these questions on the wall. And I want to just invite you to come on up. If you have more questions to put up, go ahead. And why don't you just walk around, take a break, walk around and look at these questions. And then when we sit down again, let's talk together about some of the ones that you want to address. Okay? If you really, okay. Just want to let you know that this is a very, very difficult issue because conservative Christians are so against it, homosexuality, that it's very difficult to have a rational conversation. So I want to at least give you my understanding of this issue, and then it's not necessarily the correct one, but I do want to make sure that we think about how to approach gay people in a proper way. Well, first of all, the big concern is the curriculum going to encourage homosexuality? Okay, I would say that based on my experience in our school district, the curriculum will probably say at the most that homosexuality is something to accept as a norm. Okay? Not a norm for everyone, but a norm for some people. No, I don't think the curriculum will ever tell people that you have to all be gay. But the curriculum will say that if you are gay, don't try to change them. That's what they'll say. If a person is gay, try to accept them for who they are. That's the most that the curriculum I think will go. And then they might teach things about homosexuality orientation is not a choice, which is under dispute. But I think that if gay people say that, I think it's hard for me to keep arguing them. They'll say to me, "This is not my choice," and I'll say, "Yes, it is your choice." I don't think it doesn't make any sense. I don't think I would win that point. Like if I say, I feel like I'm a Chinese person, right? And then someone says, "No, you're not. You're Taiwanese." It's like, what's the point? So in my opinion, that's not the kind of fight that I want to get into. Okay, so I would say that first of all, don't worry about the curriculum changing. I don't think the curriculums will ever say that everybody must be homosexual, but it will always encourage us to accept people who are gay. Okay, and that's about it. And the problem is that if our faith doesn't want us to accept that, then we have to learn how to embrace that. So this is how I think we can do this. First of all, in the Bible, homosexuality is not considered it's considered a sin. Okay, let's just put it straightforward. It is not considered something that's acceptable as a norm. And the reason for that is not just because of a few Bible passages that condemn it, but it's because, remember that when I talked about creation being good, right? And then Paul's thinking is that homosexuality is a reversal of what is good about creation. Creation is good because God made man and woman to be husband and wife, right? To procreate, to be fruitful, right? So homosexuality almost seems to be opposite of that. So because of that, Paul calls that an anti-good. Right? It does not mean that a person who says that he or she's homosexuality deserves to be beat up. Okay? Maybe that person is the way he is because he's a victim of the sin, of the fall. He's not necessarily. So if a person says, I am gay not by choice but because I was born this way, I would say, okay, let's accept that. And we don't go and tell that person that you're wrong, change. Instead we should just say, that's a tragic consequence of the fall. And there are many other things in our life that are tragic, that come as a result of the fall that we don't beat up on. If your child is born with a birth defect, do you go into the child and beat up the child? You can't do that. Right? So I would say that's one approach, not to condemn and jump all over it. To say, I understand this is the way God has, this is the way sin has created this situation. So to the homosexual brother or sister, I would say, this is how it is for you. I still will love you, even though there's all these other things surrounding this situation that's not comfortable. Right? So that's one way of approaching it. Others have told me that, suggested that we just don't fight about the orientation. Say homosexual orientation itself is not a sin, but it's a consequence of sin, but we don't condemn it. Rather, it's homosexual practice that we have to, that goes too far. So that's another differentiation. So having said all that, my bottom line is PLJ. Be a peacemaker, be loving, and be joyful. Don't go to a gay person and say, ugh. You need to show them, because there's so many gay people that I know who grew up in the church who were kicked out of the church because they came out as gay. And I feel so bad for them, because they also want to love Jesus Christ. They also want to be good Christians. They're also sometimes more sensitive than other people, and the church kicked them out. So I don't want us to be that kind of church. I think that we have to learn to live with them. And this is an issue that we have to work on a case-by-case basis. That's my opinion. Okay? So in the school, if people are pushing for the gay curriculum, there are always the gay folks who are very militant. Don't let them get you upset. They're a very small minority of the gay population. And the militant ones are bashing the church. They're purposely trying to antagonize Christians. But they are a very small minority. Try to work with the majority who are just more, who are easy to get along with. Right? Do you have, this is a whole mouthful, yeah.
No, I just say yes, I totally agree. Because if you don't accept them, how can you share the Christianity or it's even Jesus, if he facing those gays, he surely do the same thing,
yeah.
Right?
I think the love comes first.
Yeah,
absolutely. I hope that that's our church's reputation, that we are a church that will not go up and protest and jump all over the place, but rather just say, look, if gay people are there, we have to love them as Jesus did, even if we don't agree with them.
Can we consider them as patients, so they suffer from a condition or illness?
They won't accept that.
And it's discrimination, actually.
Yes, that would be considered discrimination.
It was, though, that gay was actually considered psychiatric patient until 1976 or something. So it's actually a really bad idea to say that out loud.
That's right. Yeah, we have to be careful because politically it's not good. And I would say that I wouldn't even use that language. I'll try my best to just accept them at their word and still embrace it, even though I don't think it's really appropriate. The place where I think Christians can, and we can try, I don't know how well we can do this, but if we say to them, all right, you can abstain and just live, abstain from any sex, we can still embrace you, because that's different, right? It's similar to saying, encouraging our young adults not to engage in premarital sex, because if they engage in premarital sex, that's also considered non-biblical outside the Bible. So for gay people to not engage in gay sex is similar. So we can encourage that, but I don't think we can go off and say, we can heal you. I think that's very hard, because the same thing happens if we have a children with a disability that's not healable. We can't keep insisting that we can heal this person. A parent who has a child with a disability just has to learn to live with that and still love that child, right? So that's the Christian thing to do. So anyway, I'm sorry. Am I spending too much time on this? I'm just hoping to think of some practical ways of addressing this. Any other questions about or comments about this issue? Okay. And some of you may not agree with me, but I'm just talking about a sort of a strategy of addressing it so that we don't find ourselves doing the things that will make our Christian faith disgusted by people who don't like us, we're condemning everyone. I don't want to see us do that. Okay. There's one about self-identity. How will she be seen by her classmates and peers? And how do you maintain your own culture while growing up in America? Do you want to talk about that? Okay. Some of you, I heard, were talking about this already, but any suggestions from you? I already, some of us send our kids to Chinese school. I was a dropout. But any ideas from your side? Go to church, this church. Right? Because there's a lot of good Taiwanese/Chinese culture that's here, which I love, you know? Any other thoughts?